Marquette Devon Burton, the saint and the sinner, giving you lessons from a pimp. Today, folks, this is going to be an exclusive. I'm going to give you a case study about a woman I've met recently who's experienced significant trauma in her life, particularly sexual abuse from her father. And I think this will be instructive to you because many women have experienced sexual abuse and other varieties of abuse. So I'm going to give you this case study, which will not only tell you about that, but also tell you how to observe a woman, how to approach her based on what you learned in observing that woman, how to peel back the layers of the onion so that you can build that rapport and really understand her deeply. And then lastly, based on what you know about her, maybe even based on that trauma she's experienced, how's that going to affect how you should interact with her, how she's going to see you, how she views men, what is the value she has to offer? Should you avoid this kind of woman? Should you engage this kind of woman? We're going to deal with all of that. So first and foremost, let's get to this story. I live on a first floor apartment, and from my apartment, I can basically see everyone who walks their dog. They have to walk their dog right past my balcony. Most people walk along the sidewalk because it's clearly demarcated for you to walk along. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you're going to walk along this sidewalk. However, I noticed a tall, good-looking blonde woman who would walk her dog way in the rear of the parking lot, essentially in a space that's not designated for walking. It's primarily for automobile traffic, which would indicate that she's an introvert, that she does not want to engage any other people. Either she's shy or antisocial, or there's some reason she doesn't want to get engaged with other folks. And so I thought that was worth noting, because that's not the general white girl personality, now is it? So I observed her do this consistently 5 or 6 times, so I knew that this was by design, that she was walking in this far edge away from everyone else. And she would walk regularly, meaning that she doesn't have any wild schedule or unexpected things or excitement or social activities that stop her from being there every day at just about the same time, alone, walking her dog. Never with a friend of hers who's a female, never with a guy friend or a boyfriend or a significant other, always alone. So I observed that she's an introvert, probably doesn't want to engage people, could possibly be shy, and is a person of routine. Myself, not being able to get to the gym for a time, I would exercise nightly out in the parking lot. On one of the nights, I observed her approaching behind me, walking her dog, and so I turned around and said hello and engaged her in conversation about very general topics. I learned that she was in the medical field, and we had some conversation about that. I was covered in sweat exercising, and she was supposed to be walking her dog, but it turned into about a 30 to 40-minute conversation, which is meaningful because it indicates that she is indeed open to conversation. And I thought to myself, good-looking, intelligent woman, I should get to know her. So it turns out I was out exercising again, and here she is again. We engaged in another conversation. It happened about 4 times, and then on the 4th time, I said we should exchange contact information. But before I did that, I want to give you one meaningful note that prompted me, that let me know she was open to exchanging contact information and possibly building something. We were having a conversation about food, which when you first meet a woman, you want to engage in easy to talk about topics like travel, like food, things like that. And she'd mentioned a particular food. I was like, oh, you like that food? There's no way we could ever be together. And then she said, no, I'm sure we could be together. That's not a big deal, which would indicate that on a subconscious level, she was letting me know, hey, I'm available, I'm open, and I may be interested in you. So that's why I knew I should ask for her number. I didn't ask for her number in that conversation. I wanted to let her wait a little bit, draw up her hunger. Why? Because I know she lives in my building. I'm going to see her again, so there's no need to rush. So the next time I saw her, we had another conversation. This is when I was exercising again. She was walking her dog. It was becoming a regular occurrence that we should meet at the same time. And then I said, let's exchange contact information, which she was more than willing to do. The important thing to understand, though, is that it seems as though every time I was out exercising, she happened to be out walking her dog, which to me indicates that from her apartment somewhere in this complex, she could see when I was exercising, and that would prompt her to go walk her dog because I was exercising at different times each night. So that gave me some meaningful intelligence or information on her. So the first thing I did was I invited her out to lunch, which I generally don't recommend you invite people out to lunch because then you have to have good quality conversation, and most people don't have a personality or anything meaningful to say. So it's better to do activities than to do meals. But in this case, I already knew she was a great conversationalist because I've had multiple conversations with her. Further, knowing that she lives in my building, I really wanted to vet her and get a strong sense of who she is, her personality, before getting involved romantically. Why? Because when someone lives near you or knows where you live, they can be problematic. So you really want to get to know them very well. So I invited her out in a neighborly way on a friendly level. We went out for lunch. We met there. I arrived on time per usual. She arrived about 10 minutes late. I went ahead and ordered my food because she was 10 minutes late because I didn't want to wait and I was pretty hungry and I don't like tardiness. Women will generally be late in as much as they don't want to be sitting there by themselves or feel lonely or look awkward. So they'll often come late. It's to be expected. Anyways, we had a decent conversation. We didn't go too long on the lunch. And when the lunch was over, it was on a Saturday. I said, hey, thanks. Enjoyed it. See you later. And left. Oh yeah, she gave me a hug. She hugged me like she was my auntie, which would indicate that she's slow to engage physically, that she's taking her time. She may be more conservative, which is, generally a good thing. Me, I didn't invite her out to anything else that time because, when you have lunch with someone on a Saturday, generally they might have their whole day free. So you might say, well, what are you doing after this? Or what are you doing tonight? Didn't say any of that. Hey, nice to have lunch with you. We did the little auntie hug, got my car, went on about my business. Then following that, we exchanged a couple text messages here and there, nothing too involved. And then I invited her out to a lounge in our complex. I said, hey, I'm going to be working. Would you like to come hang out? And we can chat a little bit. I'm sure you have some work to do as well. So she did come hang out and we both did our work and had some conversation. Did that for a couple hours and then we went our separate ways. No moves made, nothing romantic, just building the rapport and giving her a sense of myself, but mostly being a listener. Then for the third time, I said, okay, I'm interested in what I know so far about her. Let me start to really make a strong move and position myself. The best thing you can do with a woman is to get her to have a sense of who you are or an image of you without you having to do any talking. You don't have to self-aggrandize. You don't want to be selling yourself. You don't want to be marketing yourself and bragging. You'd rather her put two and two together to figure out who you are. So in this case, what I did was I invited her out to the best steakhouse in the city. And when we got there, she said she was going to go with the filet mignon, which is an expensive dish, which is good. Pretty much everything on the menu is expensive. But I ordered the A5, which is, they have Wagyu and they have Kobe beef and all this stuff. So the A5 is, I think it's like $70 per ounce, and you can only order a minimum of 4 ounces. So you're gonna end up spending at least $200 on this steak, right? So I ordered that, and it just, kind of sets a certain tone with the woman. So you don't have to brag about anything. You just, boom, like, yeah, I'll have 6 ounce A5 or an 8 ounce A5 steak. So anyways, during that conversation, we talked about a few pop culture things, the Jeffrey Epstein documentary being one of them. I did observe that when I said, these pedophiles really should be executed, which is a strong statement, she didn't really dig into it, which is remarkable in as much as we're in an era of complainers. We're in an era of #MeToo. So women wear complaint as a badge. Everyone wants to be a survivor. So either they're, really engaged in it or they want to burn down every man. She just didn't really have much to say about it, which I thought was interesting. So we then had a little conversation about family and about her parents. And she also was quite brief, which was in contrast to how she would speak about other topics that were not personal. And so I kind of made a bookmark about that. It was a pleasant dinner. After the dinner, I did the exact same thing I did the last 2 times I saw her, which was to walk her to her car, hug her like she's my auntie, nice to see you, and carry on. Then I followed up on text message. Not immediately after. I'd waited till she sent me a note, and then we were going back and forth. And I had told her about my wrist, which is hurting, and she said that she might be able to help me out with it. I said, okay, fantastic. Is this a part of your Kundalini yoga practice? And she says, no, not really related to that. And I said, oh, okay, well, for you, is Kundalini like a spiritual, religious thing? She says, yeah, and also for many other people, because it helps you deal with trauma to your central nervous system and blah, 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 blah. And so I asked her, I said, oh, have you experienced any trauma to your central nervous system? She says, well, people have experienced all kinds of traumas, whether it's fear of abandonment, it's mental, verbal, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and blah, 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 blah. Then I followed up and I said, well, I didn't ask about people. I asked about you. Have you experienced trauma to your central nervous system? This is all via text. Now remember, for me to be able to say something so direct, people don't really interpret your words as much as they interpret who you are. So she's already understood me to be a compassionate, empathetic, even person who is very caring of children and women, which is all true. And so when I said that, she took the risk of being open and she said, well, yes, I have experienced trauma to my central nervous system. And in my case, I've had a dysfunctional family and my father abused me sexually. So yes, definitely. And she says, that's a lot to say over text. And I responded, yes, that is a lot to say over text. I appreciate that you were brave enough to share that. And I look forward to seeing you again. And that was kind of the last place that I left it before I wanted to make this video, because generally speaking, you might think, I should avoid women who have baggage or have trauma or who have damage. Well, in some cases, you may be getting a value. And so I really wanted to dig into that. So the first thing is that individuals who have experienced trauma kind of wear it in two different ways. Either they wear it on their sleeve and they want to tell everyone about the bad things they've experienced. And those are usually people who haven't experienced anything that's really that bad anyways. Then you have people who have experienced things that are completely unbearable, terrible things. They usually hold that deep within, buried in a casket with tons and tons and feet of dirt covering it. And they never want to uncover it. So that's hard to get them to share that unless you've positioned yourself in a professional capacity as a therapist or as a mentor or something like that, or you've really found a way to position yourself and that they'll open up to you. Generally speaking, the people who share their secrets or like all the bad things that happen to them, like with anyone, those are people you want to stay away from because they're swimming and living in their pain. They haven't necessarily dealt with it. They're more so almost using it to get more attention, and they're just like bathing in it. And to them, it's like a part of who they are. They identify as a survivor. When in reality, the past no longer exists. The present is the only thing that exists. Not even the future exists. So they're not necessarily living in the present in a pure way. They're bringing all this baggage from the past and constantly reopening this wound. Not to say there's anything wrong with talking about your traumas. On the other hand, those who kind of have it buried deeply, it may be because, hey, I've dealt with this. This is not something that's relevant to my daily life. I don't need to keep bringing this up. Or it's, this is so painful that I'd rather not look at it. It's so hideous. I'd rather not deal with it. And that's most often the case. You've probably dealt with a woman who's been victim of all varieties of abuse, sexual, physical, mental, emotional, and you never knew because you didn't take out the time to be a good listener, to build rapport. What I want to point out to you is that women who have been abused, generally, depending on which category they end up falling into, some of them end up being very combative. They look at you kind of in the same identity that they look at their abuser, because maybe their father's a black man and you're a black man. For example, I can tell you my personal experience. I've met 3 white women who have either been abused sexually by their father or just observed their father do things to their mother that they found to be very disturbing, and they do not date white guys. And they say it's because they like black guys, but I surmise it's because the black man is portrayed as the opposite of the white man. And so when they look upon this man still being heterosexual, they can at least deal with him because he is the antithesis of their abusive father. And in the case of this woman that I was describing earlier, I was talking to her over dinner, and I said, well, what kind of guys have you dated? And she says, oh, well, I've recently been involved with some Middle Eastern guys and some Indian guys. I was like, no white guys? She was like, no white guys. Haven't dealt with them in a long time, and seemed proud of it. She never dealt with a black guy before either, which is not surprising, but she was proud not to have dealt with a white guy. Now, if you're white and you haven't dealt with a white guy, that's unusual. In fact, I want to warn you, gentlemen, that if you're ever dealing with a woman who does not like dealing with her own race, that should kind of be a red flag. Not to say everyone needs to stick with their own kind, but to say that if you don't like your own kind, there's probably a significant reason for that. And that's something you guys should look into. But anyways, one of the great values of a woman who is highly intelligent, has experienced great trauma, in the case of this young lady, sexual abuse from her father, which is very disheartening. If it were up to me, I would execute the dirty son of a bitch. You have to know that you will need to approach this woman with great caution because of the trauma. For example, you, like myself, might have women call you daddy. You might be wearing it out like, yeah, you love daddy dick. You love daddy dick. Whatever the case is, but she's been sexually assaulted by her father. You probably don't want to say that, right? You need to know that in advance because that can go all wrong. I highly recommend that you go in deeper to learn exactly what happened. Because if, for example, he used to spank her in a sexual way and make her do sexual acts, and that would be the start of it, you don't want to spank her. You don't want to do anything that resembles the abuse that he used to enact on her. And there's nothing wrong with being straightforward with her and saying, hey, I don't want to do anything that happened to you when you were abused. If you wouldn't mind, would you tell me a little bit about what happened to you so I can be aware and I can help navigate that with you? Use whatever words are appropriate. Choose the appropriate time when your relationship is developed or when you're in the, the right mindset mutually to discuss that. But you don't want to do anything or say anything that's going to remind her of that trauma, because surely that can be a point of meltdown. A lot of women basically deal with post-traumatic stress syndrome over a lifetime from this kind of thing. Another thing to know, though, is because in her childhood as a girl, she basically experienced a male who was immoral, untrustworthy, and dangerous. Surely she would truly appreciate and attach deeply to a male who is moral, honest, trustworthy, reliable, and predictable, right? When you have all of those characteristics and you display them on a consistent basis, this woman will attach onto you and never let go. She will be the most loyal, dedicated, slavish woman you will ever come across, because you represent all of the things she's been searching for her entire life, things that a girl who grew up in a healthy nuclear family took for granted, things she has desperately always wanted for herself and for her offspring. So if you can represent that to her, she'll be a really down-ass bitch. So you don't have to worry about that. But to get her to open up and to get her to really see who you are will take skill, maneuvering, consistency, and patience. Now, Anthony Garcia, one of our patrons, had mentioned that he had a girlfriend who had experienced abuse when she was 8 years old. Her father was domestically abusing her and her mother. And he said she had PTSD. And he essentially asked, how do women who have been victim of their fathers, essentially, how do they come to view men? Do they begin to hate men? And will they think that you will do them the same way their father did them? I think, number one, we can undoubtedly say that if the relationship between the female and the father was broken, either she will be in complete rebellion of the patriarchy, or she will be searching for a proper patriarch. It'll kind of go one of those two ways. She's like completely rebellious. Fuck men, I don't need a man. Even though she's heterosexual, she just have a lot of anger and pent up resentment toward the male. Or she'll go the other side and she'll be more on the shy side, more demure, and she'll really be subconsciously seeking a good patriarch, seeking an honest man to play that role that her father never did play. An important piece, though, is in terms of the way human beings see one another. If a woman was abused by her father, she's highly unlikely to end up dating men who resemble her father racially, in terms of habits, in terms of inclination, in terms of tonation. She doesn't really want to conjure that back up, right? So certainly she's going to avoid her father's image. In terms of, does that make her hate men? Well, I think in some cases it does, but most cases it doesn't make the woman hate men. It makes the woman fear men. Because she's been abused, she has that fear. How does the human animal react to the fear? In many cases, they put up walls and barriers, so they end up being closed off. They don't want to open up to you. They don't want to be forthcoming with their thoughts and emotions. They don't really want to commit and put all their eggs in one basket. You know, they're closed off. That's how it manifests. It's mostly a fear response, not an anger and hatred response in reality. The fear is what's driving the surface level behaviors of being closed off or of being mean or angry or things like that. And then the last thing is, yes, at some level, they do expect you to do the same unless you show them otherwise on a consistent basis. Because in response to a trauma, it makes you irrational, which is to say that they falsely associated these immoral behaviors with the male or with white men if their father was a white man. So those are things to think about. I hope this really helped you. I do want you to be aware that many of the women you do deal with will probably have had some experience of sexual trauma because it's so common, unfortunately. Hopefully one day the assassin will rule and we will hunt down and murder every one of these pedophiles and make the world a better place. Please share your thoughts, questions, comments below so we know if this is the best kind of content that really gives you value for your subscription. And I truly appreciate your support of me and my work. And saints, until next time, let us close this with the creed of the assassin. Repeat after me. I am going to be who I truly am because I am remarkable. And I will strive every moment to show the greatest part of who I am.